We're making a list and we're checking it twice because it's time to review the 2025 MXGP season and all of the positives and negatives that came from 20 rounds of intriguing, furious action. But before we get there, we need to unpack the retirement of Giuseppe Luongo, which has fueled social media chatter around the world once more. Glenn Coldenhoff is off to Brazil. That's going to be a focal point of this MXGP podcast show. And all in all, we're wrapping up 2025 in style. And that is mainly helped by my cohort, Adam Wheeler, who is not only a Paddock Pass podcast man, I've just recently learned, and I'm still slightly shaken, that he is a movie star with lines and all sorts, and he's going to be on a big screen near you real soon.
Yeah, movie star's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, pushing the boat too far. But first of all, Lewis, have you been naughty or nice?
I think that I've been bad.
Yeah?
Yeah,
I don't know. I think life and circumstance have given you a good slap in 2025.
Well, also 24 and also 23. And I went down a rabbit hole with this the other day because I was like, probably been one of the worst years of my life. And I was like, well, I would have said that last year and the year before. I was like, oh, this probably should stop thinking about this. But anyway.
So would you say you're on the way up or the way down?
No, I'm floating. We're just in obscurity, wondering what tomorrow will bring and hoping that there'll be a resolution soon.
Okay. Well, I mean, with experience and extra life, then, there's always enrichment, I think.
That's inspirational. I'll remember that. I'll call upon that in those darkest moments. But I think rather than the naughty or nice list, I'm probably on the irrelevant list for Santa. I didn't even move the needle one way or the other.
I'm sure he's listening to one of your podcasts somewhere.
I feel like you are probably excluded from said list because now that you're a movie star, you're not included in the regular guy activities that all of us are.
We should quickly explain this so we can dispense with it and move on. I have a slight speaking role in the new MotoGP film Ídolos, which is the Spanish way to say idols, and it's like a bit of an indie film, but kind of swimming in the wake of the Formula One movie. It's quite sort of hyper realistic. Of course, Formula One, its spiritual home is in the UK. The British Grand Prix is one of the biggest attended sporting events. In fact, I think it's the biggest in the whole of the United Kingdom. It's one of the best attended Grand Prix on the whole F1 calendar. And for MotoGP, it's Spain and Italy. So this is like a bit of a Spanish indie movie. I'm calling it an indie movie, but it's actually been financed by Warner Brothers. And it's getting its premiere at the end of January. And towards the end of 2024, when I was trying to finish doing this book, I spent 2 days filming, one in Valencia and one in Barcelona, being a journalist. So even if some people think I'm not terribly good at it, at least I got to pretend I was a journalist for a while.
This was 2 days of filming?
It was, yep.
That seems like you really downplayed it to me that you had like a question to ask. That seems like that wouldn't take 2 days.
Yes, and it's quite shocking how many times you have to do the same scene over and over. And then when the director feels he has the version of the scene that he wants, they then film it from 2 to 3 different angles. So when I was asking my question in the press conference, they film me from one perspective, then they take a step closer, and then they do a close-up again. So it's so he can cut between various different angles. I'm curious to see what it looks like, actually.
And hair and makeup, I presume, and that full shebang?
As soon as you arrive on the set, you go through like a bit of a conveyor belt system. So firstly, they say, okay, we want you to wear this, or what would you normally wear? And I took sort of clothes, and I had even my sort of MotoGP permanent pass. And then they sort of shepherd you into sort of makeup, and then they put you into the hair chair and say, how would you like your hair? So it was a big education. And of course, when they break, there's a whole catering set up, and you can sit there and stuff your face all day if you wanted to.
How long did all of this hair, makeup, conveyor belt take?
Goodness, it wasn't long.
Okay.
10, 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. I've always heard rumours that in movies that takes forever, but I guess it's not like you were having a change of skin color or anything drastic like that.
It wasn't like I was an alien or something, or I'd been in a horrific accident and needed some severe aesthetics.
Well, maybe you should have led the direction of the film in that. Like, I know I'm here to just ask a question, but wouldn't it add more depth to my character if I had some sort of gash down my face and maybe the writer stopped the press conference to ask me what I'd been through? You could have really steered it into the Adam Wheeler movie.
I gave them some tips and said, look, in a real press conference, you would do this or you would say that. In one of the press conferences, there's actually a bust-up between the riders and the protagonists, which, is kind of interesting, considering that in real life, MXGP and MotoGP press dealings, they can get a bit spiky, and there's a few sort of barbed comments, but it never really gets to sort of fisticuffs. I mean, the movie world is just reality hyped up to 11, isn't it?
Do you remember your line?
It's well over a year since I did it.
How is this such a secret? I listened to the Paddock Pass podcast. Where was this?
Well, it took a long time for them to do post-production, apparently.
But if I filmed a film yesterday, I'm coming on the podcast the next day and telling everyone.
I'm sure I mentioned it. I must have mentioned it somewhere.
No. Look at the size of my ears. I resemble an elephant, and our memories are terrible. I mean, brilliant. Really screwed that up.
Don't you reckon... Wasn't there some talk recently that there's going to be a movie with Timothée Chalamet and he's going to be like robbing banks or something, and he's going to be the story. I read it on the news, and he's going to be an ex-MotoGP rider who's now a dirt bike rider, and he steals money from banks on a motocross bike. I thought that's got a lot of potential.
It's not a worse concept. Like, hey, I have all of these skills on a bike, and now I'm going to use them to be a whatever you'd call it, not a protagonist, an antagonist. It reflects terribly on the sport, but we take our lumps quite regularly, so we can take this one in our stride as well. Final question on your film. Were you the only MotoGP media person invited for this?
Yes, but there's a lot of MotoGP people involved in the film. The Aspar racing team, who won the Moto3 World Championship in 2024, had two sort of world-class GP winning rookies in Moto2 in 2025. They're heavily involved. A lot of the riders too. It's basically like the F1 movie, but for MotoGP, and it's in Spanish, but then, of course it will be dubbed. And I don't know in terms of international release when it will come out, but I'm guessing it's going to be through sort of the Warner Brothers platform.
And which will now include Netflix. There you go.
Yeah. I guess they're still... Well, Paramount are still bidding, aren't they?
I don't know. I have actually been keeping up with that for some reason. But my final question. So you were the only press person. If the MotoGP press room is as snipey and hostile as the motocross press rooms, I'd imagine this didn't go down too well.
No, nothing like that.
Oh, okay.
So, snipey, I don't know. Definitely not hostile.
I mean, the MXGP press room is snipey that we're doing this podcast. So can you imagine if we were in a film?
Yeah. I'd say it's a little bit like petty, though, isn't it? It's not really snipey. But yeah, I mean, I was asked by a Spanish colleague if I would come in and do the lines, and I said, yeah, okay. And I think he was originally going to be doing it as well, but in the end he didn't. And then I was sitting in this press conference surrounded by 15 or so extras, which is also very interesting to study these people and how they get the job. Essentially, they're just like on some sort of, what do you call it, like a forum, like a list. And so when they do filming in a particular region, like Valencia or Madrid or Barcelona, they go through this list and say, right, we need a selection of people from 21 to 35. You have to come along for the day. They get paid a flat fee, and then they just sort of sit there and wait for direction.
This is fascinating to me. I can't believe I didn't know anything about this, but I'm glad that the podcast can share this news, and we're really expanding into other genres now. We're doing film and behind the scenes of that, and to only support that fact further, a little bit premature because we're not in 2026 yet, but very, very, very excited to have support from DC Shoes on this podcast for the 2026 season. I mean, I grew up in the era where DC Shoes were it and the thing to have. Of course, they dipped a little bit in the 2010s, now on their way back up, and I'm excited to be a part of that.
Yeah, many congratulations for getting that deal, Lewis. I do worry, though, that we are not cool enough to have a brand like DC Shoes on this podcast. I think it's definitely a little bit more in your avenue compared to mine.
I'll go and skateboard after this. Or maybe I'll do a bit of rally. No, but that's an interesting thing about DC, isn't it? It's kind of finding its image again, I'd say. It's finding its footing in the world. So, like, I don't really know how people perceive it. I mean, ultimately, I think it is still a skate extreme sports brand to the naive eye. But it's definitely a little bit more open to interpretation now.
Yeah, I think so. And also, I think if we get onto the subject of branding, I think it's quite interesting because you remember Volcom.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a brand that was like heavily kind of connected to motocross at one point. I mean, I think Ryan Villapoto was probably the most high profile advocate or what's the word? But yeah, it seemed like everybody was interested in wearing Volcom stuff. It looked a bit edgy and it looked a bit kind of no theory, but for the naughties. And then they suddenly disappeared, and you kind of think, well, maybe DC Shoes are just want to reestablish those motocross credentials, and props to them.
Yeah, and on that subject, when I was in Australia, I stumbled across a Volcom store in a mall, and I was shocked. It was like a relic, I would not have thought that I would see that in the current day. But yeah.
Is this another reason why you love Australia then?
No, I never really was a Volcom guy. I don't know why. Even then, I felt like I wasn't cool enough for Volcom. DC caught me when I was still somewhat cool, or again, open to interpretation. So I managed to really wear the shit out of DC Shoes at the track when I'd go racing and whatever else. Even now that I think about it, if I think back to my childhood, around the front door of my house, there were just so many DC Shoes for different people. But hey, very happy.
Well, I'm sure you must have destroyed a lot of them at motocross, because one of the things that people probably don't know about you is that you don't wear the appropriate footwear for motocross races.
Yes, image.
And I include Sean in that as an image.
It's image.
To completely destroy your trainers when you're up to your ankles in mud.
I'm telling you, the amount of riders who have stopped from day one of my job to now, who have stopped me at a race and gone, oh fuck, I like those shoes. That is a statement that says I'm not just another media guy. It says oh, I'm on your wavelength.
Yeah, but how many have you destroyed by not wearing, say, a pair of what do you call it, Gore-Tex or waterproof shoes?
No, I think the benefit far outweighs the detriment, which isn't a popular saying at all. But I don't think that's going to catch on. But the benefit far outweighs the detriment. But thank you to DC Shoes for their support, It's not going to be a traditional. You're not going to hear me spiel on about DC Shoes every single week. We're going to do some cool stuff. It's going to be different to a typical podcast partnership. One where, honestly, rare to have a conversation with a company where they fully see it, get it, and want to they're not a motocross company, are they? So I guess that's where it comes from. So very excited. Equally excited, of course, for the continued support from Polisport and ProX Racing Parts. Anyway, we are 13 minutes in. Haven't really done anything of relevance yet. People are probably very mad. But on with the show, Giuseppe Luongo has retired, which, to be honest, isn't that shocking or noteworthy to me, because to my knowledge or from my viewpoint, he's been so out of the picture for X number of years now that this feels more like a formality than a groundbreaking press release.
Well, maybe it's something to do with the trauma of naming his son David, but then it being converted to Dan and causing all sorts of confusion around the family.
He wanted to get out before it happened to him.
He turned into Joe Longo.
Giovanni.
Giovanni. Yeah, you're right, Lewis. I think the biggest thing is how much influence did Giuseppe have in the last few years. I know that his health wasn't the best it's been, but in terms of doing behind the scenes negotiations or advising, doing consultancy, setting out a strategy for MXGP, it's really hard to say how much of that he was involved in on a day-to-day level. Even if in front motor racing, before that Ustream, before that action group, largely comes down to his leadership and his vision for how a sports promotion company should work and how it can work within a motorsport sort of framework. So his influence in MXGP, of course, is unparalleled, and the fact that sort of an official press release came out saying that he's stepping away is it's still sizable news. I know for some people, and maybe a lot of people who are not so well informed, he's like Satan incarnate or whatever, and his views on how the sport should be managed, really kind of split the fan base. I think a lot of people struggle to understand the rationale behind some of the decisions that he made for the direction of MXGP. But then, I've been in his company. I've enjoyed his company at dinner table. I've been sat in his office getting a rollicking from him for not being proactive enough with positive messaging through my articles and materials. So I've done interviews where I've tried to get some information from him, and he's very forthright and he's very honest, but then he completely and utterly believes in his own propaganda and his own beliefs, I guess, for the sport. So there's no real kind of swaying him in that. I've seen extraordinary press conferences where he's gone off on very emotional rants, and I've seen him work a room like you wouldn't believe, just being able to be charm personified to all types of people, whether it's somebody helping with the catering, or sort of the head of the FIM. He was just a charming guy, and of course he took a lot of decisions, I think, that proved unpopular, but then ultimately made motocross a sustainable sport, to the point where I was able to get through something like the pandemic, where it cost a lot of money to run.
Yeah, more than anything, I think people shout at him because they point to him as the reason why there is no prize money in MXGP, which is true. It is true. But yeah, I guess he had his reasons, and that model is sustainable. I don't really know what to say about that. Like, that is his.
Listen, I've been critical of the establishment, but you have to see it from their point of view. They're here to try to do the best for the sport, but also make money. They're not just going to spend all that energy and time away from home to do it for fun. Any company is going to be the same. And I think for all the times we thought, these people are absolutely ruining the sport, imagine if somebody else just came in and said, we're going to do it this way. They could be even more radical. MXGP tried to go to one moto. They tried a super final concept. We know that in this day and age, having 4 live motos on a Sunday is just not really going to be, the way to engage a new kind of, what generation are we on now, Lewis?
Gen X?
Gen Z? Gen X? I don't know. Whatever kind of, this is the struggle that MotoGP are having right now. So yeah, motocross in that way is you could say, you have to give maybe the Longos and in-front motor racing some props for keeping the structure of the sport as it is now, and not sort of breaking it to try and appeal to a bigger audience, which, has to be the motives for any company.
I'll have to dig it up to see if I can find it. But in the wake of the Erne strike, the next week, Mark DeRuvas reached out to me and said he wanted to do a podcast. And he basically did a podcast where, from memory, he tackled all of this and basically said, I was in the prime of my career when prize money went away. And I think he was kind of positive about it. Now, a lot of my MX5 stories and articles were deleted, so I don't even know if it exists anymore. And I should have done a better job of backing up my own work, but I didn't realise that I needed to that degree. But I'd be interested now to dig it up again and see exactly what Mark had to say, because even now, a couple of years on, it lives on in my mind as that was the most prominent comments I've heard from a rider in reflection about the ditching of prize money and in front's position in the sport.
And also, it was maybe a bit premature because it sent shockwaves through the sport. It essentially eradicated privateer existence. But then I think the world was moving in a way where, and obviously with the emergence of 4-strokes and how much more expensive motorcycles became to buy, to service, to tune, whatever, that, there was no way that the sport and the way it functioned could support, like, even prize. How much prize money do you need to be able to get around a 20-round calendar and, be able to exist as a racing entity and also make a living. It would be an astronomical amount of money that just wouldn't have really been possible.
Yeah, ultimately, if they added prize money, then the complaint would be it wouldn't be enough. They wouldn't become applauded for adding prize money. They would just be criticised further for it not being enough.
Yeah.
That would without doubt be the way it goes.
You can always say, if you're making 10 million, then why are you not giving us 7 and you making 3? The world just doesn't work like that, does it? And, okay, Monster Energy came on board as a title sponsor. You kind of think, well, should some of that deal be siphoned off to help the teams and the riders? But then, in front will say, well, actually, we need to hire another 6 or 7 staff. We introduced a double tier pit lane. We made more infrastructure. We want to improve the TV broadcast. We need to ferry another 20 people around the world. I mean, all this is extra costs. There was one point, I don't even want to think when it was now, but it suddenly became a lot more expensive to fly and to book hotels and hire rental cars. I mean, all this stuff, incremental costs, that also affects the life of the sort of privateer. And I think that motocross was late coming to the upgrade of the fact that riders just getting around Europe in a van wasn't really kind of the look or the image that the World Championship wanted to be. And I think in front, Giuseppe wanting to take MXGP to an exclusive level to try and ape MotoGP or F1. Some people can say, well, we're not that. That's not our sport. That's not our niche. Stop trying to make it so big. But again, I think you're caught in two worlds there, because their remit also to the FIM is to promote the sport, to take motocross to new countries, new territories, new audiences, look for new commercial opportunities. If they made a 12-round series that visited the same old tracks around Europe, I think someone at the F1 would be saying, listen, guys, are you really exploiting or are you really pushing this sport as much as it could go?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think that, yes, if there were 40 riders on the start line each week, a fan might sit at home, look at the TV and go, yeah, good, happy about that. But it wouldn't really have much more of a benefit beyond that one fan. Obviously, there'd be many of them, but that one fan's opinion. So I think you've got to admire, you can criticise and admire at the same time the aspirations that came from Giuseppe and what his vision for the sport was, because I do think the MXGP is better for it at the top level with the Hurlings and the Geysers and the Fevres. I think they are benefiting from Giuseppe's vision. Now, you could argue in contrast that the Panzers aren't, but I think that behind closed doors, in France's stance would be, well, we can't make an entire championship around Panzer. Which is true again. Like, you can't dispute that. You just can't. And to your point about Monster coming in, I've heard them say a few times, like, well, when a team gets Monster as a title sponsor, it kind of comes from our work, and we don't go to the team and say, well, you need to give us 20% of that. Like, which again, I mean, it's a little bit twisted, but it's true.
I mean, the worst thing I heard really about the Luongo regime at its height was just like a lack of diplomacy. If teams were struggling, they didn't give them much thrift in terms of listening or wanting to help, which I couldn't quite believe, because I think, you can sit around a table, you can try and find solutions, but then you also hear other crumbs of gossip, like, for example, Teca, which is like I think a German, electrodomestics company, kind of like Braun or Zanussi, Samsung, this kind of thing. When they wanted to get involved in motocross, Giuseppe Luongo and Ustream at the time directed them to Suzuki, saying, Sylvain Gabor's factory team is one of the top teams in the championship. They're the ones you need to be aligned with. And then you saw Teca for a couple of years running, that sort of title sponsorship and prominent presence on the bikes. Ken Roxon, I think, was, winning his first GPs on a Teca Suzuki, I think. So, there are stories like that where it's not a case of Ustream and Giuseppe taking all the money that could possibly come into the championship and just sticking it in their own pockets. So, it's all kind of hearsay. You never really know the full truth. One thing I think you can point a finger at and say is, where is the outside sponsorship? Why has there not been more done on a commercial sense to really bring new, fresh money into the sport? And, could you have helped the teams a bit more than, aside from a travel allowance and indemnity to get to overseas events? That's kind of like where they could maybe have followed the Dorna model for MotoGP a bit more. I mean, something even token would have helped. That but yeah, I mean, I do think there are positives. And one thing you can't fault Giuseppe Longo for, Lewis, is just his passion and his ability to stick at it and to keep ploughing away at promoting motocross. Because let's not forget, he sold his company twice, to control MXGP. He could easily have just lived the rest of his days on a boat or on a beach somewhere and not gone anywhere near motocross, but he kept turning up, he kept shaking hands, kept doing deals with the FIM and promoters around the world. So, I think you have to give credit to sort of the application of somebody like that.
Yeah, without doubt. And I think the overarching question from listeners will be, so MXGP is going to change massively from this point on? And the answer is no. Again, it's more of a formality because David has been in control for the best part of a decade now. Giuseppe was on the end of the phone, which he still will be. He was adamant about that in a press release. So it's not like the direction or the position of the championship, their morals is going to massively change all of a sudden. Ultimately, the only difference will be the man at the very, very top of the tree has a different first name because even the last name is the same. So, don't expect...
Well, interestingly, sorry, mate, to interrupt you, but I think the big picture or summation of the whole thing is that, the partnership of Giuseppe Longo and Wolfgang Scherb, the late Wolfgang Scherb from the FIM, the motocross commissioner, the image, the powerful image of those two just controlling Grand Prix motocross is now over. It's now in new hands and maybe with a new direction. That's something that, didn't seem possible at one point.
It will be interesting how, again, it's just a change of title for David. He's gone from CEO to president. You could argue those two are very similar titles. I guess he's now president and CEO, right?
Good question.
That wasn't detailed.
Did they get a CEO in?
Yeah, I guess if so, then Daniele Rizzi would step up to be the CEO. I don't know.
Yeah, Daniele. Could be. I mean, Daniele he's one of the guys who's pulling all the levers behind the scenes and, making the mechanics of the World Championship, or the mechanisms, perhaps is a better word, making MXGP happen.
But it'd be interesting to see how they handle this change of title. Like, does he go on a bit of a PR trail? Is he suddenly much more front and center come Argentina, round 1 of 2026, to kind of just reaffirm the fact that it is now solely me? I'd be curious to see how that goes. In fact, we tried to get him on this podcast in October to no avail. I wonder if it's worth another stab, just because, hey, Mr. President, might be time to speak to your people.
Well, we might have more success with Dan than we do with Jorge Prado. I actually, I've reached out twice now to Jorge to ask him if he'll come on the podcast, but he actually just replied to me this afternoon saying he apologized for getting back late, but at the moment he's not in a position to do any podcasts or interviews. I think the one he did with our friend and colleague Jason Wygant for Racer X was as far as it will go, and I think we did pretty good to preface that by saying that there's some sort of NDAs in agreement with Kawasaki and he can't really say all that much.
And also I think that interview was led by Insta360, a sponsor of Prado and Ouija's podcast, so I think that even Prado was maybe influenced to get on the call there as well. I don't think he's necessarily... Honestly, I think he's just jaded. Jaded at all of the media, all of the people who have a voice box, and you can't blame him to a degree. You really
Definitely
can't.
Bruised.
Yes, maybe that's a better term. But hey, we'll get our answers with Prado on track in just a couple of weeks now. It's not far away at all.
Have you liked what you've seen at the practice track, the famous cliched practice track?
Prado's Prado. He doesn't change. So we had the media days last week, and every rider came in, with the exception of Kenny, as far as the top 450 guys go. And every rider had their own, like Webb, for instance, was like, yeah, the new Yamaha, we do have problems. I'm spending far more time testing than I did in previous years. Tomac, as much as Tomac will, said, adapting, blah, blah, blah. Hunter was talking about tyre feel and suspension and how he switched to a new stock front axle because it changes the feel of the fork and all of these riders kind of gave a hint of working through stuff as you'd expect. Prado Everything's great. This is awesome. The one rider who's ready for Anaheim 1 is Jorge Prado, which is consistent with his public speaking throughout his career. Never one to, what would you say, fall on his sword, or never one to show weakness, or...
Yeah. Well, maybe he has his fingers. Also, you think he had his fingers burnt through the Kawasaki episode by saying how good everything was.
Yeah, to be honest, I
off.
think Chase is the same. He's in a similar fashion. He's a little bit gun shy now because, to begin with, he told everyone how good the KTM was.
Yeah, but then Prado is going back to a platform that he's known his whole life. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if on the first day of riding the Austrian bike, he just said, "Give me exactly what I won the World Championship with in 2024, and then I'll crack on," just to sort of get some feeling and confidence back.
Yeah, supposedly he did do that. Apparently, the way the new KTM is stock, because obviously there's a production rule in America, his settings from MXGP fit right onto the outdoor bike, and that's why he was immediately happy. Again, just all glowing reviews from Prado, which is a consistent in his...
Well, the way KTM run it is they have their factory edition, don't they? So it's like a souped-up production bike, which they then sell, 500 units of to meet the homologation rule. Prado would have basically had those settings, like you say, Lewis, that he's immediately familiar with. I saw the video. I mean, what can you deduce from that? It's hard to sort of really make a read onto the speed that he's carrying. But I think he could surprise people. In the first couple of races, if people like Webb are trying to sort out the Yamaha, and would that be the kind of Yamaha that they've struggled with in MXGP, the sort of pre-production version? Yeah. So it's not exactly a glowing reference, is it, from Grand Prix racing in 2025 that the Supercross guys might have to handle. And then, of course, Chase is going to have his own voyage of discovery on the green bike. Eli Tomac, you'd have to imagine, might need a couple of races before he's figured out the full intricacies of the KTM at race speed. Prado, with that familiarity, just might turn a few heads in the first few rounds.
Well, in a similar vein, my biggest takeaway from the media days was that Jet Lawrence is going to dominate because he seems to be the only top dog with familiarity and with a sense of stability. And I think that will loom large, especially when he already has a talent advantage, you could argue. I think everyone would agree with that.
Yeah.
So since we last did an MXGP podcast, Glenn Coldenhoff's next move was announced. Yamaha Brazil, with some European races mixed in, but not really. It's not really a commitment. It would be more for fun and his own program, so nothing too concrete to shout about. There's a lot of outrage at this on social media because the bronze medalist in 2025 MXGP couldn't get a ride. And again, this all stems back to people pointing to in front and saying, how can this happen in this series? Blah, blah, blah. I look at it differently. Glenn had a price. Glenn had an expectation of a motorcycle, and I don't think the options in MXGP suited those. And equally, I think Glenn just had bad luck in the sense that the way it all fell this year with the riders who were out of contract, those who were in contract, who signed where, he kind of just was the one left without a chair in the game of musical chairs. I don't think it's necessarily an indictment on his character or his talent or a reflection of the state of MXGP. I do just think it was bad luck for a rider who has a minimum requirement.
I think that's a great point you make, secondly, because no matter how good you are, you're always going to be behind Tim Geiger and Jeffrey Herlings when it comes to contracts. Even if you have the season of your life, you're just not going to be on the same level as those two when it comes to negotiations or appeal or whatever. So Glenn, I think, just sort of fell between the cracks somewhat. But I mean, he's had 10 years now in MXGP. He had a great season, the best one of his career. I mean, like you say, P3 in the championship, but maybe it's a season that he should have had quite a long time ago. And like you say, if he has a price and an expectation and there's not many teams that can reach that, maybe that is also a fallacy of MXGP that, a lot of satellite teams don't quite have the means to be able to employ a rider like Glenn Coldenhoff. But still, it means his options were reduced. And with Fantic kind of changing their orientation, I guess you could say, by moving away from Louis Vostas' team as Vostas takes on Ducati, I think just it was a bit of a perfect storm of circumstances to stop Glenn being in for another one. But I think It'll be very interesting to see how he gets on in Brazil. I mean, Carlos Campano, who with full respect, is not the same caliber of rider as Glenn Coldenhoff, has made hay out there for years, winning sort of Supercross and Motocross titles. So I think Glenn, will be in a good chance with, becoming a star over in Brazil. And I also expect there must be some sort of Yamaha agreement there where he could fill in, as a replacement rider, because just look at the record of Maxime Renault, for example, in the last 3 years.
Well, even maybe an arrangement that goes both ways, both a replacement in MXGP or Pro Motocross. He kind of leaves himself open to either opportunity. It's the correct move for Glenn at this point in his career. He is, I don't know the numbers, but we know what Yamaha Brazil typically pays and what the Brazilian series pays on the whole. He's making great money. From a financial point of view, this would probably be more lucrative than any MXGP chance that sat before him. The same goes true for Pro Motocross, because he did talk to a couple of teams, satellite teams in America, and again, the salaries were just not even worth getting out of bed for. So it's a shrewd business decision. He was a little bit burnt out on the routine of MXGP, a lot of the same circuits, a lot of the same travel, the same format, similar to Caroli. Caroli made those same comments. And you know what? You can actually call a lot of comparisons to Caroli, because Caroli was burnt out on the situations in MXGP and stepped away and regretted it. Glenn was, and has just moved to the side. So if he follows in a similar path to Caroli and is like, you know what, I do actually miss that now, I've had a year break, I'm good, he can step back into the ring of fire quite easily, whereas Caroli maybe boxed himself out a little bit too much. I mean, he's said as much on record this year.
Yeah, South America's a big market as well for the likes of Honda and Yamaha. And I think it's quite good that GP riders can consider, career alternatives. I mean, not so long ago, it was Australia. GP riders tended to head towards the Australian Championship. Of course, the Supercross events have their own profile, but the Motocross series as well wasn't too bad. And, maybe now if Brazil is a viable option, then it's just good that riders can sort of keep their career, going and make it longer.
I mean, Van Hoorbeek is racing in Brazil, and if those who know, if Van Hoorbeek is on the track, there's money there, because this man does not get on a plane unless the paycheck is more than worthy. So that gives you an indication. And also, I'm forgetting now, but there's Enzo Lopes, there's Coldenhoff, there's Van Hoorbeek, there was Rubini this year, but not next year. There's a good little championship forming there. It really is. And from what I've heard, I think KTM Brazil is now looking to step up and enter this little fight, because it's very much a Honda versus Yamaha championship. So to your point, this could very much become a backup plan for the stars of today, which is exciting.
I'm not sure how volatile the economy is there, but it's been 10 years now since we had the last Brazilian GP. But you have to imagine, if this sort of swell of interest in motocross continues, then we could be going back there in terms of MXGP in the not too distant future. They'll be running their first MotoGP Grand Prix just down the road from where the last MXGP was in Trinidad. I don't know. Bike racing back in Brazil.
Well, long rumoured a return to Brazil. Very long rumoured. I feel like that has to be at least in discussions behind the scenes for the rumour mill to be fueled each go around. But no, yeah, good for Glenn. I'm glad that he's sticking around the sport. Let's say that. I'd much rather have Glenn Coldenhoff in Brazil than Glenn Coldenhoff in retirement. I think that goes without saying. And just, I think I've said this before, but for those wondering how he didn't end up on a Wilvo Louis Voster's Ducati, I think Ducati was so focused on Tim and Jeffrey and then Renault that Glenn was and felt like an afterthought. So just was kind of like, yeah, no. And also, I don't think he was interested in developing a new bike at this point in his career. So I think that if they had come to him first or second and gone, we really want you, Glenn, we really want you, then yeah, maybe he would have been more invested in the project. But ultimately, I think he just felt like a puzzle piece left to the side that was being picked up out of necessity. So, Anyway, Shall we move on to our... Oh, go on.
Yeah, I mean, he finished P3 in the championship, Lewis. So it makes me wonder who finished P1 for you if we look at 2025. I mean, is Roman Febvre your rider of the year, or would you be inclined to pick another one who's not Ben Watson?
Well, I actually
Who snubbed you, by the way.
Yeah, we're working on a Ben Watson podcast. It's so exclusive and amazing that it naturally is taking a long time to figure out. But that's what happens when you go to the very top of the sport, naturally. Hurlings and Watson, just two very, very hard to catch riders. I did some work for this, and I wrote down my opinions, and I left best rider blank.
Oh, why?
Because how are we defining this? Because is best rider just Febvre or Lagenfelder? Or Koenen
Do you
on
want
De
me to go
Wolf?
first?
Yes.
Lucas Koenen. Because... right. So Roman Febvre tallied the most podium finishes in 2025. Had a fantastic season, a fantastic career arc and trajectory. But he posted the kind of results that I think we expect, that he has a level of performance that he should have been hitting, in the last sort of 5 years or so. Lucas Koenen, on the other hand, came in as a rookie. Weeks before the first GP, had fractured his wrists. And to sort of then, accumulate the statistics that he made, I mean, I wrote them down somewhere. 13 podium finishes. He had nearly double the amount of moto wins that Febvre managed. He led the most laps. He had the most qualifying heat wins on the Saturday, all in his first sort of taste of 450 racing. With Jeffrey Hurlings, a very competitive as a brand mate at one point. I just think that shades it for me. I think it really was a massive, massive, massive statement of intent by the Belgian, and Romain deservedly. I mean, he was on the podium 14 times in a row, Febvre, and that kind of consistency is phenomenal. But I think Lucas for me just gets the badge for 2025.
Is that heavily influenced by the rookie title, though?
No, well, I mean, rookie title is just the fact that he was a rookie.
Yeah.
I think has more to do with it. I mean, if it was his second or third season, you kind of think, well, somebody of his potential and caliber should be doing that. But to do it first time out, pretty good.
Well, in a similar vein, I kind of was leaning towards Kai de Wolf, mainly for the second part of the season, because I feel like he unlocked a new level of pace and form that we didn't even see in his championship winning year. I felt like he really took another step to put a cherry on his MX2 career. So I guess I'll go with the other silver medalist to continue a sort of theme for my rider of the year.
Can you, I mean, we've been very dismissive of MX2 on this podcast. Can we really nominate an MX2 rider as the rider of the year?
Okay, I didn't want to say this because everyone's going to shout at me. Do you want to know who I wanted to give it to in MXGP?
Who?
Kevin Horkmo. Okay, he got injured, so it's a while back. You really need to dig into those memory draws. But
this is a reach, Lewis.
At the start of the year, if you look at the entire deck of cards and look at who overexceeded their coverage, who stepped up beyond reality, I think there's only one rider, and that's Kevin Horkmo, because although Lucas Koenen was a rookie, we know just how good Lucas Koenen can be, and if he won the title, we wouldn't have been surprised. He was pegged to be the best of the best. Whereas Horkmo, again, this is why I left it blank, because maybe it's not best rider, maybe it's most improved rider, but I do think he deserves a nice little acknowledgement.
Definitely a pat on the back, but to call him rider of the year, I think that's, I'm not buying it.
Okay, well, the title was best.
I don't think, there's no way at the start of the season I would have said that Lucas Koenen would be a title candidate.
Really?
I expected him to have the typical rookie season of winning a couple of races, looking awesome, but then also struggling.
This is where it all falls down. Fair. That's completely fair. But if I told you that to be in title contention, you're not battling Tim or Jeffrey and only Febvre, 100% you would have gone, oh, well, Koenen can beat Febvre. 100%.
Yeah, I would have maybe included Renault. I mean, let's not forget Max won the first GP of the season. I mean, Paul's Jonas as well, I would have said, fit and happy on the Kawasaki. He would have been a threat for Lucas at some point. But nobody really knew what Lucas Kunin could do. And I think if you'd said he's going to be fighting for the championship into the last round, I think very, very few people would have said that before the first GP.
But again, it all comes down to the semantics because, yes, that sounds incredible. But when you say it wasn't against Tim or Jeffrey, then you're like, oh, okay, that makes much more sense.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know that before the start of the season. So expectations coming in means that in the end of the day, Lucas Kunin, before a wheel turned in MXGP 2025, then had a fantastic year.
I hate this game. Okay.
Well, DeWolf, I think, is a really good shout because apart from February on 16 podiums, Kai took 15 and he didn't win the championship. He made a fantastic show of it. But there was, like you say, a level of maturity and consistency that seemed to be an improvement above what he managed in 2024. For me, also firsthand to see him dominate like he did in Lommel in the sand was fantastic. I think one of the most comprehensive performances I've seen in the last few years. If you're not talking Jeffrey Hurlings in the sand. So I think mentioning DeWolf Lewis is pretty accurate.
And mentioning Horgmo also accurate.
No.
Okay, just wanted to be clear.
Was your barometer there? I would say Isaac Gifting perhaps has made more of an impression, from the resources and the position he had. He's definitely, I've written down some moments of 2025 and his what's the word for it? Tragic is one, but then the euphoric performance in Sweden, was one of the sort of the high points of the season, I think.
Yeah, but I would argue that, again, Horgmo did that, maybe not quite that, but close to that, on a more consistent basis and therefore really showed something and has left a lasting impression on Lewis as he kicks on his DC shoes and walks out at 2025.
Okay.
What category would you like to do next?
What are we on?
What do you mean, what are we on? We just did Best Rider.
Okay. So what's the next one? You're saying, what about...
Worst Rider?
Yeah, this is always a difficult one, isn't it?
Which is affectionately renamed to Biggest Disappointment.
Biggest disappointment. I think I know what yours is going to be.
Well, I have one rider and two manufacturers, which one of them you can guess what the
Yeah.
No prizes for guessing one of the manufacturers.
Can I say Yargo? What are we 2 years, 3 years removed from being the best and fastest 250 rider in the world championship?
Mm-hmm.
To sort of now relative obscurity on a bigger bike. Let's not forget as well, after one day at the Motocross of Nations, things were looking amazing for Yargo, and he was going to be actually the next Belgian to sort of emerge in the Premier class. But then, of course, Lucas Kunin has completely taken that spotlight. Injury, of course, not helping, but then maybe some decisions. I don't want to go too much into it because it's not like I was talking with Yargo and getting insight into his situation, Lewis, but it just seemed completely bereft of confidence and really struggling. And that kind of summed up Yamaha's plight as well.
Just insane to think that at the end of 2022, Vial and Yargo parted ways joint on points. Since then, Tom Vial is a two-time Supercross champion and Honda HRC rider, and Yargo Geerts is on a beater. That's insane how careers can go in such different directions, and not even like there was a massive age gap that you can point to for the reason or the catalyst. Insane. A book could be written on how we've ended up in this position with Yargo, but he wasn't on my list. Almost.
Oh.
But that is also indicative of how expectations have fallen to such a point where his results this year didn't even really move the needle for me, which again is sad because that should be the disappointment without doubt. But instead I went for stablemate Maxime Renault. One podium and a whole lot of nothingness. Yeah. If anything, the single win to start the year has only fueled this selection because it was a brief example of what he was capable of.
Was it an injured wrist and an injured hip?
And pelvis and ribs and everything else.
He really bookmarked 2025, didn't he? Winning the first GP in Argentina and then getting on the podium for Team France at the Nations. It seemed like he just sort of skipped out the rest of the year. Started on a good note and finished on one. And also with all the conjecture about his contract and trying to get out of Yamaha, but ultimately staying in Yamaha, his career is at a real crossroads for 2026.
Yeah, I don't think it's this bad, but he could certainly look at Yargo right now and go, that's the horror tale that I don't want to repeat, you know? Like, I think there can be some similarities bore there. But
Lucas, go on. No, sorry, go on.
You're going to go back to Lucas Coonan?
I was going to go back to Lucas, but I think we've already covered that. Carry on.
I'm curious what you think of this. Obviously, I listed Yamaha as a disappointment. I also listed Ducati. Because,
really,
similar to Renault, it started with so much promise. Guadagnini 4th overall in Argentina. They whole shot both races. Sua podiumed in Switzerland early. And then Ernée, which was just before the halfway mark. And it kind of started at a point that it never progressed from. Like, again, similar to Renault, where we got a taste and we didn't really get the full meal.
How many Sandy GPs did we have? What, 5 you could really classify? I mean, we had Riola, we had Arnhem, we had Lommel, Latvia.
I think that's it, isn't it?
I mean, Argentina was kind of very loose soil. I'm not sure
no, that's not
sandy. But you wouldn't want to go near like a Desmo 450 MX in the sand, that's for sure. He looked pretty abject. And I think Jeremy Sua and Guadagnini went through a real sort of journey of discovery. But that was the job. That was the remit, wasn't it? And then, of course, Ducati making changes in the way they work with the change of team for 2026. Question marks are still there. And when it comes to developing a bike at the highest level, complete and utter newbies, rookies, and perhaps they just need to put a little bit more faith in the experience of somebody like Jeremy. He had his bright moments, but also his frustrations, as we know, throughout 2025. But I think having 2 podiums, Lewis, is pretty damn good for a first shot.
Yeah, it just comes down to perspective, doesn't it? Because if you look at it as just 2 podiums, then that's brilliant. But then if you look at the rest of it that surrounded that and the fact that the 2 podiums were anomalies rather than an indication of something bigger, then, I don't know. I was a little bit curious writing that down. I wasn't exactly set, but I thought it would make for a good question. Okay, go.
What are you more disappointed by? Kevin Bruman's media profile in 2025 or Jeffrey Hurling's?
Well, Kevin Bruman got around. I had an email that told me he was signing autographs in Australia. He made it. He was there. Thank God. Our light, our beacon in these troubling times. And Hurling's, you know what? I deserve a lot of credit for not putting Hurling's as my best rider. And I think that everyone would have expected that from me.
What? No? I can't believe you're even entertaining that.
We won't get into it because we don't have time.
No, but very quickly, Lewis. I mean, my closing statement, if we're going to go in sort of judicial, terms. 2025 was just the typical Jeffrey Hurling season. He finishes on the podium 6 times, and 5 of them were victories. And then he just wasn't anywhere else. Injury affected, coming into the season, during the season. The guy is just a class apart when he's fit and he's riding. And, the way that he sort of cut through and dealt with Febvre and also Coonan at the GP of Germany was a good case in point. But, just for the championship, just flip a coin.
But again, perspective, you could argue more people doubted him than ever before at the start of this year. I really feel like the tone was dismissive of Jeffrey. And he, arguably, by the end of the year, proved that when it's on, he's still the same Jeffrey and still, as you said, a class above everyone else.
Yeah, but not the best rider of the season.
Okay, I've changed my mind. My best rider of the season is Tim Geiser because he dominated the start of the season as we expected and one, not 2 like Jeffrey, one cruel injury ripped him of what was honestly an automatic championship. And I don't think we should forget what Tim did. Therefore, Tim, is my rider of the championship, because I think him going out was the catalyst for all of these positive comments about Romain and Lucas. If Tim was still on the track, I don't think that we're talking about the other riders in the same way, which means that he was the best rider. Well,
did Tim actually still stay on track? That was the reason why he had his accident. Yes or no?
Well, there's a lot of ins and outs for that thing. Some people want to burn it. There could be another Giuseppe argument. Really could.
Preempted one of my moments of the season, because you're right. I mean, Gaja finished on the podium 5 times in the first 5 rounds. 3 of those victories, it was looking very much like an HRC resurgence for the Slovenian. And yeah, that injury, Lewis, was it a displaced shoulder, or surgery required, of course, on the shoulder, just ruining the year. So I mean, that was.
When you say ruining the year, you mean for Tim or for us?
Yes.
Okay.
No, for Tim.
Okay, I was going to say, arguably that saved us from a very, very boring championship.
No, because maybe Koonen could have kept it. I mean, Koonen didn't win for
Tim was
3 or
like
4 GPs,
700 points ahead.
Yeah.
So also again,
though.
Perspective. You could argue that Lucas started winning once Tim was out as a byproduct of the best rider not being on the track anymore, and that fueling confidence and inner belief.
Well, I was going to mention this later, Lewis, but MXGP at the moment on their website have a promotion for MXGP TV for 2026, and they have 6 faces on there. I mean, you have Gaja, you have Hurlings, you have Tom Vial, you have Kai de Wolf, you have Roman Febvre, and Lucas Koonen. And if you put all of those 6 together, and you keep them as healthy as long as you can, and that's, I mean, who else is going to get on the podium?
Giddy I am about 2026 MXGP. Giddy. And I applied for my permanent accreditation yesterday, and I left a note that said I will pick it up in Argentina. Full commitment. Next category, best race. And see, truth be told, I completely forgot about Sweden. So the gifting race probably would be it, but seeing as I forgot about that, I was dicing between Lommel and Arnhem, and I went Arnhem. Because for Jeffrey versus Lucas, it was all very exciting.
I plumped for Lommel purely because being there as well, it made more of an imprint. And I think that was one of the cornerstones of Febvre's championship, really, because we expected Lucas to be so strong, but then Febvre did exactly what he needed to do. There are probably other motos as well that stand out. I mean, Germany as well with Hurlings, the 3 of them going at it. And Hurling's finding that line on a very sort of slick and treacherous track. But that's all I can say, I think.
Best circuit? I went with Darwin without doubt. I didn't even give it a second thought. I thought that the racing...
No, it was ruined.
No, but the racing was incredible, and the way that Darwin opened up insides and outsides and switchbacks and opened up passing was unlike any other MXGP track. And if it wasn't for Darwin, I was going to go for Cordoba, because it really was a worthy replacement of Villa La Angostura. But again...
I'm going for Kozar.
Well... if you're trying to get yourself fired, Adam, then way to go about it. Really getting the vibe that you don't want to be here next year.
No, I agree with Cordoba, Argentina. It's a shame that the race isn't going back to that track, as we discussed on the last podcast, is heading further south to Bariloche. But yeah, aesthetically it missed something, didn't it? It looked like it was in a big sort of dust bowl, but the flow of it, the speed of it, it was like an invigorating reintroduction for MXGP, I thought.
And if you want to go best venue, then every year, without doubt, I will vote for Trentino, because there is nothing like it. And I get asked a lot by American industry racers, ex-racers, what GP they should visit, because they've never been to one and they'd like to. And I say Trentino, because it will encapsulate the X factor that MXGP has, and only MXGP has. Trentino.
Yeah, with the asterisk that it's a very typically Italian race, very compact. Don't go in with big expectations of convenient parking. But now it's quite a well-run event. The first couple of years it was a little bit more hectic, but yeah, it's not a bad shout.
A trio of impressive or good impressions that were made on you this year? Standout moments, I guess, whatever you want to call them. What are your takeaways?
We mentioned them, Isaac Gifted in Sweden, and seeing the crowd react to that. Gaisha's crash was pivotal in the championship story. Seeing Kawasaki celebrate a long overdue world championship. Of course, the Kaida Wolf, Simon Lagenfelder, who we've barely mentioned, that duel going down to the last in Australia when that weather was incredible. And when it seems that MXGP in 2024 and 2025 has had some of the worst rain-hit races I think we've seen. There's been a few, Lewis, and I think that's pretty much it. I mean, let's not forget as well that we had 5 different winners in the Premier class this year, and we had 3 riders all winning 5 GPs each. I'm struggling to remember a championship where we had such parity in terms of distribution of the race wins. And, we had 3 new GPs, with Finland, Australia, and I'm forgetting one more. Help me out. There was another new venue. I guess Argentina.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course, I was trying to think of a country. No, I will echo all of those sentiments. I just wrote down the start and the end of the year because both new circuits and both really knocked it out of the park. So a very positive reinforcement from MXGP to start and end the year. Completely contradicting myself, I wrote Koonen, which I guess means he should have been my rider of the year. And I also wrote down Glenn because I think that this will be remembered as Glenn's best season. And actually, going back to the Glenn thing, the Glenn going to Brazil is not a reflection on MXGP or in front or anything like that, but it is a reflection on the fact that we're missing the standing constructs of the world. The standing construct for Wilvo Yamaha, because they would have had the money for Glenn and the bike for Glenn, and that would have been where he ended up.
Yeah, but in turn, that's also reflective of MXGP. That those teams are not sustainable, and they're not able to remain in the paddock. I mean, you could point the finger at standing construct and saying, well, having 2 Goldfish Bowl trailers, is that really the most cost-effective way of going racing? I think that's a criticism that's what I mean. It's a criticism that you could make an argument for both ways. The satellite teams are really like the lifeblood. And, if there's one thing that MXGP has been very, very disappointing in 2025 is the numbers of riders making a Grand Prix gate, especially in MX2. We've been over and over and over this, Lewis. I mean, if people want to try and dig into it a bit more and then select any of our podcasts, I think, through the season. But that's one issue I think, the championship needs to fix. Yeah,
and that would be my criticism of MXGP exiting 2025 is I once again get the impression that A, nothing is changing, but B, there isn't really a bid to help people understand what's going on or why nothing's changing. And to be honest, so much in this social world is made of, in the off-season, these series are still very prominent on social media, with content, with whatever else. And MXGP has become very forgettable because it's not pulling its weight in off-season content. Some of the stuff on Instagram is beggars belief. It's just terrible. I've had a lot of conversations with Feld, and their vision, or their dream, let's say, is to have a transfer window like football, where in October, like everyone's at Anaheim or something, and then everything gets unveiled, and then they have a 12-month prominence online and in content and on TV, and it feels like MXGP wrapped up in Iron Man, and then went, see you later. I feel like so much more can be done to reflect on these great accomplishments that we've just listed, some of them, of 2025. But for instance, I saw a video yesterday on social media that was a video of a rider doing a jump in MXGP, and the caption said, your dream's at 6:59 a.m. when your alarm's going to go off at 7 a.m. And it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? How about Fevra? Kawasaki haven't won a championship in X amount of years, and here's a comment from the boss, and it just I don't really understand. It's lost. And I've said this again, you can find any podcast that points to this, but there isn't. Honestly, it was maybe the most aggressive I've ever said it. There isn't an idea on how to market a championship in the current age.
Yeah, we need to see some new initiatives, I think, in MXGP as well. We mentioned it before. How about like an independent team prize, an award, some sort of system, some sort of remuneration for that. Also, when it comes to preseason, why isn't there like an official Grand Prix Zero, an official test, or maybe even an official mini series building up into MXGP? Give it an MXGP badge, get some of the staff there, get maybe some of the, getting a more extensive camera crew there, organize it between three venues because if you have the teams gathered, because they will be doing Italian or French or British races anyway, establish like a 3-race schedule. And then, you'll get the fans in, and I think it could be made profitable. And then you would have like a little bit more of a formal setting to build up into GPs. I mean, it's not something that every rider will be able to do. For example, in 2025, you wouldn't have had Jeffrey Hurlings doing that because of his injury. But, I think there has to be a little bit more, like you say, strategy involved, and not just like, hey, everyone, MXGP starting again like a week before the first GP.
Yeah, like there's so much said about like, from the media, like, oh, promote MXGP TV, promote MXGP TV. And it's like, no, that's archaic to promote MXGP TV. The promotion of MXGP TV is us talking about how amazing it is that Hurlings and Tim are on different bikes. And then organically, people will find MXGP TV. It's all just a little, but it's not just MXGP. Like, this hit me quite hard the other day. Kawasaki Racing EU on their Instagram account posted, in what was an incredible season for Roman Febvre and Kawasaki, what was your highlight? One comment. One. In 4 days. And it's like, get a better social strategy. B, delete that. I mean, we've all been there, personally or professionally, where we do a social media post and then it gets zero traction and we're like, well, that looks bad, let's hit delete and rethink. And that's collabed with Kawasaki Racing EU, Kawasaki MXGP and MXGP. So it's just done nothing, which proves that another gripe of mine, you know what, let's go out of 2025 with a bang. Another gripe of mine, what is it with the MXGP paddock and the collab button on Instagram? We are collabing everyone. We're doing like 17 collabs. It's not what it's for. And it's clearly not working. You're meant to do your own content. The MXGP account just accepts any. I reckon if I collabed a video of me doing a shit and said MXGP's coming up, shitting myself with excitement, I think they'd accept it.
It might get a few comments, though.
It will get more than one. But that, you know what? That also is the sad thing. So that Kawasaki post got one comment on my personal Instagram, which I don't even use. I put a photo up of Australia and I got 20 comments. That proves that they're doing social wrong, because I'm not saying that look at me, I got 20 comments. I'm saying that there's people on social media who are ready to engage. You just need to find a way to engage them.
Yeah, and as much as people of my generation, nearing 50 years of age, I may be somewhat loath or don't quite get it all. MXGP bangs on about having such a young demographic of fans. You have to be doing that. It's like a 101 for marketing and promotion, and it should be. You need to get a specialist in there to try and be a little bit ahead of the curve. But then, I've seen a lot of slagging off of Feld and Supercross for having like an elf on a start bridge this year. I don't know, Lewis. I think, the landscape is open for you to roll across it.
So Feld have done a very good job with their social medias. I will admit that elf on a shelf comparisons missed the mark a little bit. We went a bit far there. But, you can see that they're trying. So, I'm not going to cast too terrible an eye, because I'm like, okay, well, it was an attempt to, hit a trend and be relevant in the current age. MXGP is still doing... This also got me recently. You must have seen this. They've done it for as long as I can remember. Their advent calendar, where they post a different full race on YouTube for a day of December. We're still doing that. It's been doing that. We've been doing that for 15 years. I think it's time to maybe do something different. I don't know. It's just...
Speculate to accumulate as well. Maybe there is somebody trying to do 3 different jobs in MXGP, and social media is one of them. But I think it's an area that really needs some desperate attention. And I know it's something that Dorna have invested in a lot more for MotoGP. It just, like I said, it has to be done. It has to be good as well.
Yeah, I would like I'm scrolling through MXGP now, Instagram, and there are some posts that do have good engagement. So I would argue that it's more just a quality control situation. It needs to be more picky and selective and a little bit more like thought going into every post. It seems like random hits rather than a consistent
Wheelie
strategy.
Wednesday.
Well, I guarantee I can find one of those. I don't know. I mean, it is hard in this world, but it's just like I've said it before. I don't really like F1 and I don't watch F1, but I'm kind of pulled into the storylines purely because I can't get away from it on social media. So I'm subconsciously aware of what's going on, and therefore I can hold a conversation about F1, even like almost to the surprise of myself. And it's just a result of an profound social strategy. It has an impact on people without them even noticing.
Well, I mean, we're beating this to death, but it's probably worth pointing out that we're talking about it, and you have this kind of high-pitched voice that you do because we see potential in it, and we want MXGP to be reaching many more millions of people in Indonesia, in Asia, in India, in South America, and that is possible, thankfully, through having good social media, and it should be better, and it has to be better. So that's why we're banging on.
Yep. Sorry for getting angry. Fa la 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 la.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Lewis.
Yeah, no, good. Really, well, kind of regret ending 2025 on such a note, but
I want to be positive and say that it's been really good fun doing these MXGP podcasts in 2025. And it's very cool also to have comments from people saying they enjoy the show as well, because it's not a very radical or innovative format, is it? I mean, it's just you and I talking. We've had a couple of guests and it doesn't change much. So people have to put up with us, and they do. So I'm really thankful for that. And I hope sometimes people kind of listen or push play just to listen to our nonsense, and sometimes they actually listen because they want to find out something about MXGP. So we endeavor to get the information to educate people. So for that, I'm thankful, and I hope people will still be showing an interest in 2026.
Yeah, equally to your point, this is a very stock format, you could say. And yeah, like we could also do a lot more with marketing and social media options with this show and whatever. So you know what? Let's 2026 New Year's resolution. Let's lead by example and try and back up our own words. And we'll do a little bit more and we'll improve. But that starts, Adam. I don't know if you need overtime money or you want more money. I don't know what you need, but I will get it for you. The first week of January, Jeffrey and Tim announcements. We need to be on this. We need to be. I don't know what we need to do. I don't know what we do though, because like the Hurling's PR comes out. We've talked about it to death. So like, I don't know. Maybe we do get Jeffrey or Ben. Maybe we respond to the Jeffrey announcement by interviewing Ben.
Right. So in theory, Jeffrey hasn't touched a Honda. So even in January the 1st, when the announcement comes out, there's not really much to say. We need to be talking with him after he's first ridden it and tested it.
Yeah, okay, so this is what we do. If we don't do a full episode, and timelines are difficult for us and schedules and whatever else, we do a 15-minute rapid podcast reacting to the press release and the news break.
Okay.
And then we do, and there you go, that's our New Year's resolution. We will be better by filling the gaps when there's big news or whatever, by jumping on it with a 10-minute episode, and maybe you can charge the same price for a 10-minute episode, in which case it'll be a fucking brilliant move. 2026 we're really getting smart and wise for 2026.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, Michael Lindsay. I'll be in touch.
But no, stay tuned for that, everyone, because that is big in early January. And I think I'm actually interested because social media wise, again, I'm curious how much the Jeffrey Tim photos dwarf Anaheim coverage, and I do think it would at least take a percentage of the shine off of it. Has to. It's amazing.
Can we finish with a ridiculous question?
Yep.
2026 MXGP champion shout right now. I'm going to say Lucas.
I will preface this by saying I don't think there's a good option, because there isn't. So
okay.
You think Lucas is a gob? I guess Lucas probably is the safest pick to that point. Because even Federer, like, although Federer's a champion with no change, I am a little bit, like, still skeptical as to whether Federer can battle Tim, Jeffrey, Lucas now on their very best days. I don't want to go Lucas because that doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't feel correct. What feels correct is going Jeffrey, but I can't do that, can I? Because you'll laugh at me.
No, that's a fair enough comment, and we're probably going to be giving the same opinion multiple times, even before we've had the first race.
Subject to change based on how he likes to bike and how he adapts and what the early rounds say. But right now, with zero knowledge, I will go Jeffrey.
Over Geiger on the Yamaha.
We have concerns about Geiger on a Yamaha.
If it's the same Yamaha as last year, then yeah.
I need to get to the bottom of this, but I have been told that Tim has a hell of a lot of freedom with Yamaha to basically do whatever he wants, and B, that there may be a prototype Yamaha coming for Tim, like a 28 model or a 29 model even, like in the works for Tim to race. So I don't know. Maybe it will be the best situation ever for a rider like Tim. But as of right now, with their history, Yamaha, not Tim, it's far too risky a shout. Early prediction, Kaiser Wolf is going to really, really, really surprise a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's a good one.
And could get
that's the most sensible thing you've said on this podcast.
Thank you. He could get a medal at the end of the year. Like, I think I'd be willing to put that prediction out there. So
I disagree with that, but I do think
I went too far.
The first bit of what you said, you went too far.
I went too far. That's why 15-minute episodes are going to be really good for me, because I'll be able to really stop.
I think one super hot take for 2026 will be the development for electric bikes. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get more new manufacturers taking an interest in motocross, the likes of, say, CF Moto. But, with Stark racing in WSS SX, they're now doing the Erzberg Rodeo as well, I think. And they've been in Super Enduro, I think it is. I wouldn't be super surprised if we see the FIM getting talks and there's going to be some sort of way that the Stark Varg is racing in Grand Prix pretty soon.
Okay, just two really quick points on this. One, coming up, we do need to dive into the CF Moto thing because you know a lot more about it than most, certainly me. And in Anaheim, when I was in the media days, I was driving around and I saw a dealership. And, dealerships have the badges of the manufacturers they sell. And one had, like, Kawasaki Honda CF Moto. And it's the first time I've ever seen CF Moto so public-facing. I mean, I'm sure it's not, but it made me think that we probably need to explain what CF Moto is for my benefit, if nothing else, and get to the bottom of that in the future. And B, you haven't listened, but I did an interview with Seb Tortelli about Stark in Australia. And we went back to Stark's angry PR about the electric class. And he said, quite simply, we were never consulted about it. And how do you not consult the number one manufacturer of electric bikes about an electric class?
Yeah.
Which, yes. But also, I don't know if the electric bike field is so prominent that you can proudly call yourself a number one manufacturer yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if that title means anything. Like, I think that actually Honda and Yamaha, who will eventually be investing in these machines, probably still do matter more than... It's like me saying I'm the number one juggler in MXGP. Like, yeah, well done, that's a nice title, but it doesn't really do much for us. Thanks for coming out.
Well, I mean, on weight of bike sales, perhaps they are. And it's the only product they have. So that's probably what he was going on about.
Yeah, but again, I'm not disputing the fact that they are the number one manufacturer. I'm more disputing the fact of I don't know if that's really the claim to fame that deserves or warrants the attention from the FIM and in front that you're maybe expecting.
I think it's more a development of the technology that gives extra prominence and relevance to Stark.
True.
It's something you can't really ignore. It also ticks the sustainability boxes that the FIM are always trying to bang on about to get a bit high and mighty about the environmental friendliness of championships or the effort to try and make motorsport less of a black thing, you can't suddenly ignore a manufacturer that is preaching better, ecology, what was it called? More ecological products. It just seems like a bit of a contradiction and hypocrisy. So from that point of view, Stark is pretty at the forefront of this stuff. Going back to CF Moto as well, I don't have the statistics to hand, but I wouldn't mind betting that they're one of the most fastest growing manufacturers in the motorcycle industry internationally in 2025, purely because of their product range. And both in four-wheel, what they do with ATVs, as well as in two-wheel, I think they have quite a substantial industry presence, which is only getting bigger.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I and a lot of the motocross fan base are probably ignorant just because that hasn't bled into off-road yet so much.
Yeah.
So maybe we're in for a rude awakening. And not contradictory at all is the fact that if you go to ProX Racing Parts, they even have parts listed for a Stark, which really underlines just how, what would be the word? Expansive? No. Thorough? Maybe. Really underlines, what was that?
Encompassing?
That really underlines just how encompassing ProX Racing Parts are, and the fact that no matter what you ride, inclusive also, no matter what you ride or what bike you have or what year it is, whether it's super old or super new, you can get the best aftermarket parts for a reasonable price at ProX Racing Parts. And similarly to DC Shoes, I really back and believe in what ProX do and are doing, and I am steadfast in my opinion that you need to look on that website, pro-x.com, to see what's available for your bike, because I do believe it will change your life. And what better way to celebrate Christmas than changing your life? And I think that's a beautiful way to end.
It is. Yeah, apart from a rendition of A Christmas Carol, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think we got nice and serious at the end. Well, Merry Christmas, Adam. Thank you for showing up most of the year.
Happy holidays.
I think we missed 1 round, 2 rounds maybe, but we did a good job.
Yeah.
We're back for next year. So, I haven't actually asked you if you're back.
Keep healthy. Well, I don't want to, have more tales of costly hospital visits.
Yep. Well, £14,000 gone in 2025. So what a celebratory year. Coal and tangerines for everyone for Christmas this year.
It's a lot of DC shoes.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, everyone, for listening. The next time you see us, most likely we will be reacting to either Jeffrey on a Honda or Tim on a Yamaha. So let's get the festive period over and get into that very, very exciting news, because those first images will truly break the internet. Thank you for watching and listening all year long. We do truly appreciate it. The support from you guys around the world for this podcast, which, again, I think a lot of people dispute its relevancy because a lot of people don't quite understand the might of MXGP. The fact that you guys vote with your feet every single week and stop me around the world to talk about it and whatever else really keeps this going and gives me something to kind of slam in these people's faces. So thank you. We'll be back in 2026 with a lot more, and we will see you real soon.